We are now live on YouTube. Attendees are currently joining. We are at 39 attendees.
So hello, everyone. Welcome to the Local Equity Entrepreneur Program meeting. We are at 3:34. I think we'll just give ourselves maybe 2 more minutes before we get started and see if additional attendees join. And regardless, we'll start in just 2 minutes. Okay, it is 3:36. I think we should go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kristen Nevedal. I'm the Cannabis Program Director for the County of Mendocino. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Local Equity Entrepreneur Program meeting. Today is February 16th, and this is our monthly meeting for February. And our March meeting will be held same time, 3:30 to 5 on the 3rd Wednesday of March. So put it on your calendars, and please do join us for March's meeting, the 3rd Wednesday in March. Before we get into the agenda, I want to cover just a couple notes about how to participate in today's meeting, and then we'll go ahead and turn it over to some other participants that we have with us today. So if you are interested in offering a question, you can type a question into the Q&A panel or feature located either at the bottom or sometimes at the top of your screen, depending on how you have your settings set up. But there is a little Q&A feature that has a chat box and says Q&A. If you click on that, it will pop open an individual screen. If you type in your question, it will come to our panelists today. We will be able to answer some questions, but only minimal questions through typing back. We will wait and respond to questions at the end of today's meeting. We'll also make time available for folks who prefer to offer oral questions. And you'll be able to do that when we get into the Q&A section at the end of the meeting by raising your hand. To raise your hand, you will find that feature if you're on a screen device using the Zoom platform. The raise hand feature is in the same toolbar as the Q&A feature, and you can click on it to raise your hand and to lower your hand. If you are calling in using a phone today and not on the Zoom app or a screen device, you can use *9 to raise your hand, and then we can ask to unmute you, and *6 will unmute you. We'll go through these again at the end of the meeting when we get to Q&A, just as a refresher, but I wanted to make sure that folks know that we aren't going to take questions throughout the course of the presentation. We're going to hold questions to the end and then utilize a timer, so hopefully we get to everyone at least once. So with us today in today's meeting, we have William Riley, who is Program Administrator for the County of Mendocino's Cannabis Program. We have Caitlin Schaefer, who is assisting us with for the County of Mendocino with our live stream and our support platforms. We have Paula Groves with us today, who will also be presenting and is with the Elevate Impact Mendocino team, as well as Bruce. And I am blowing it and drawing a blank on Bruce's last name. So when he gets up, we'll have him introduce himself as well. Bruce is also joining us with the Elevate Impact Mendocino team. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Ms. Paula Groves, and she's going to get us going on this webinar.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. We really designed these meetings for you to get your questions answered and to make sure that we're keeping you up to date on all of the current information with regards to the program. And Kristen, did you want to start presenting the slides? Are you presenting them? You're on mute.
Sorry, they should be up for everyone to see. So if you would be so kind as to roll through the agenda, you can.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Thank you. So today we're going to give you some updates on the funding sources. There's some news in terms of additional allocations and extended deadlines that Kristen will walk you through. We will give you updates on the numbers in terms of how many people have applied and gotten through the application process. Number 3, where we want to spend a lot of time today in particular is on the grant and the fee waiver and the technical assistance underwriting process, approval process, contract process, and check writing process. So we make sure that people have a clear understanding of what that timeline looks like, and then we'll go to Q&A. William?
Hey everyone, this is William Riley, and I am here to present on the LEAP funding sources. And so what we have is LEAP is funded by California's Social Equity Grant Program. It's provided to us by the Governor's Office of Business Economic Development, which in our program we never call it that. It's GoBiz, known internally to us. And so how it works out is we got funded for 3 rounds of funding. And so currently we are in round 2, kind of round 1. So we have to spend down round 1 before August 2022. And I know that this was a big concern initially because we got awarded for $2,245,704, which is quite a move. It's quite a lift. And then on top of that, we have another $832 that needs to be awarded. And we initially had an issue, and so this is where the good news comes in, with the state initially putting a deadline of February 28, 2022. But we received notice from the state that they're extending jurisdictions to August 22. And so if you're confused why that number changed about 6 months into the future, we got good news. It's not getting recouped to February 28th. It'll actually remain with us until August. And then even more good news comes around. We also got notice that we were awarded for round 3 of funding. And the state awarded us an additional $2.9 million. So $2,944,035. And of course, that comes with a spending deadline of August 2023. But it's incredible news that the state followed through with this process and brought us even more money. So we'll be able to continue on with this. And then for LEAP funding round 1 specifically, where we are right now, is our fiscal year. And it's funny to see this 2021 because they gave us such a far extension out until August 22nd. And so our allocation is $2,245,704. And you can see that it's broken down in certain allocation percentages. And so typically with grants, the state dictates where the money goes. And that's where the allocation percentages come into play. The state makes it so that we have to allocate 80% directly to the direct grants, fee waivers, and workforce development. And then 10% has to be allocated to technical assistance, training to assist equity applicants regarding licensing and operating in the cannabis industry. And 10% of it can be allocated to administrative services, county staff, and outside consultants. And you can see the dollar amounts broken down thusly.
Great, thank you. And I apologize for the typo. There's no need for the asterisk next to the administrative services, 10%. That is a typo that I accidentally left in there, so it is irrelevant. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about program statistics. This is a typical slide for us, or a slide that we include as an update monthly in these meetings. So as of yesterday, as we were putting these numbers together, you can see that we have a number of eligibility applications that have been submitted via the elevateimpactmendo.com website. 204 eligibility applications have been submitted. 78 of those are currently in underwriting, and 121 of them have completed underwriting and been approved. 5 of the equity eligibility applications that have been received to date have been deemed either ineligible for one reason or another, or they were abandoned by the applicant and are not moving forward at this time. In the direct grants column, eligible applicants have completed 86 direct grant applications. One of those direct grant applications was deemed either ineligible or abandoned by the submitter. 67 are in underwriting. 16 have completed underwriting. 18 have been approved by the Mendocino Cannabis Program and are going through their contracting process, which we'll talk about in depth in this meeting. And 2 of the direct grants have had their checks funded, and I know at least one applicant has received their check as of this week. So slowly but surely, monies are going out the door, so to speak. Fee waivers, we have 65 folks that have completed fee waiver applications. 1 has been either deemed ineligible or abandoned. 56 are in underwriting. 8 have been completed. 3 have been approved, and all 3 of the approved fee waivers to date have been awarded. Technical assistance, we have 41 completed applications for technical assistance. None of them have been deemed ineligible, nor have they been abandoned. 32 are in underwriting, 9 have completed, 9 have been approved, and we're waiting for these numbers to grow a little bit before conducting the workshops that folks have applied for. So we haven't finalized or awarded any of the technical assistance yet, but we are getting some numbers together so we can move forward with that program. Okay, let's talk a little bit about direct grants. And I know folks have had a lot of questions about the timelines. There's a lot of information on this slide. Folks should feel free to screenshot it, take pictures of it, but also everyone should know that this presentation will be available in full on the county's YouTube page. So if you don't catch it here, you can listen back on it. You can scroll through the slides, and you definitely will have access to the information. So direct grant processing timeline from hitting that submit button to electronically submit your grant to the Elevate Impact team, that time until the check arrives or is sent, I should say, is generally a 10 to 17 week process. And so we're going to break it down a little bit. The underwriting process generally takes Elevate's team members around 4 to 6 weeks to complete with the applicant. So once you submit your direct grant via the elevateimpactmendo.com website, once that happens, you'll be assigned an underwriter from a team member from the Elevate Impact crew to assist you with your budget and scope in preparation for a recommendation to MCP at a weekly approval meeting. Once you've wrapped this up in 4 to 6 weeks of working with your underwriter, Elevate Impact will schedule your completed grant application for review during our weekly review of grant applications. And if there's no questions and we can approve that grant application, that's great. We'll do it right there in that meeting. But if there's questions that come up during that approval meeting, the Elevate team will bring those questions back to the applicant, and then we'll have to reschedule the application to be discussed at a future grant approval meeting. They happen weekly, so does, for the most part, kind of click along, so to speak. Once the MCP approves the grant application, we're really looking at the budget, the scope of work, and any estimates that justify the amounts in the budget and the scope of work. Once we've approved those materials, the Elevate Impact team formats the grant agreement, meets with the awardee to review the final grant agreement or the formatted grant agreement, and then sends the grant agreement to the MCP so we can start our county contract processing. The contract processing itself often takes 3 to 4 weeks. And this really is probably one of the most set in stone timelines, so to speak, simply because we have to go through this electronic contract processing system, which is what's required of grant agreements in the county. And it's electronic, it's automated, and it goes to 7 different county departments and some divisions within those departments. So there's around 12 signatures that need to be gathered on that grant agreement during the contract process. Folks will often hear us talk about the Cobblestone contract platform. So when we receive a grant agreement from Elevate, after we approve it, we review the agreement and we upload it into that Cobblestone platform. We hit send and it starts routing it to all of these different departments and divisions for their review and signature. And once we've captured those reviews and signatures and answered questions from any of those other departments, we will contact the awardee and ask that awardee to sign the grant agreement. That finalizes the grant agreement and we move on to the check processing step in this direct grant timeline. Check processing can take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. So now that the awardee has signed the grant agreement, it then gets re-uploaded into Cobblestone and routed to the auditor's office, who basically confirms what's in the grant agreement, makes sure that it's signed off on by all departments, and then goes through a process of preparing an account by which they will issue a check to the awardee. And then they notify us. They say, okay, our end is complete. MCP staff, you can go ahead and process the check or apply for the check, is kind of what the process is like, by adding the check to our weekly accounts payable batch and then submitting the check request through the accounts payable batch to the auditor's office. The auditor's office receives account payable batches from the MCP, usually no later than Thursdays of each week. And then the auditor's office processes APs and mails out checks, usually 7 to 10 days after the MCP or any department makes an AP submittal. So long timeline. And some of it is dependent on applicants. So the underwriting timeline is going to have some applicant variabilities to it, and potentially grant approval if questions are raised during the approval meeting. Contract processing could also be impacted by the applicants or awardees timeline, really in reference to getting them in the door to sign that county or that finalized grant agreement. So we can always come back to this during Q&A, but we wanted to make sure that folks had an overview of the timeline for the processing of direct grants. Also, very important to note is this next slide, and I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Paula Groves to talk about how checks work and how that issuance process works, or what's on the check. Paula?
Right. So I think that this is very important. We get this question a lot during underwriting. During underwriting, you are asked to complete a and the W-9 form, the name that you put on the W-9 form will be the name that the check is issued to. The address that you put on the W-9 form will be the address to which the check will be mailed. So please make sure that you put the correct address on the W-9 form. We've had certain people put who are working with preparers and other business partners to put their business partner's address on the W-9. And the problem with that is your business partner will get the check instead of you. So be very careful about the name that you put on the W-9 as well as the address. Thank you, Kristen.
All right, thank you. Let's have a little conversation about fee waivers. Fee waivers. So fee waivers really are meant to be used for county fees only. So we're going to talk pretty specifically about what fees fit into that. So we're not going to go into it too much on this slide, but think about fee waivers as any of your local permitting fee needs are going to fit into fee waivers, right? Because we're going to transfer funds to internally to the county department to cover the cost of that fee, whether it's a building permit fee, an environmental health fee, or say a Mendocino cannabis program fee. We do have a new process in place for planning and building services fees. So we just approved with planning and building services a fee waiver estimate form. And so when you have and you're working with your underwriter for LEAP fee waivers, if you're looking to apply for fee waiver from planning and building services fees, you will want to request a PBS fee waiver estimate form from the your assigned underwriter. And that form, you would fill out one permit type per form. So you might have to make copies of it or open multiple digital copies, but it'll be one permit per form. And then you can bring those forms to the front desk of planning and building services. You will not be able to get the estimate amount the same day, but they will collect them at the front desk. There is not a fee for dropping them off with planning and building services. They will go, they will be routed to a specified staff member in planning and building services who will conduct or do the estimate calculation and then email those forms back to the applicant and put them into our permit tracking system. This, I think, will create some incredible streamlining for folks looking to use fee waivers for planning and building services fees. You cannot use the fee waiver program for state-related fees, but you can put your state-related fees, such as your licensing fee, your annual water board permitting fees, or water reporting fees. Those fees you can fold into your direct grant budget. They aren't fee waivers. So local fees, fee waivers. State fees from state agencies, direct grant funded. Okay. Oops, wrong button. Sorry. For a list of fees that you can ask for fee waivers for that are fees associated with the Mendocino Cannabis Program. You can pull the fee waiver information off of the Mendocino Cannabis Program website. On the forms page, you'll have to scroll down a ways. There is a cannabis fee list, and so you can apply fee waiver monies to any of the applicable fees that you're going to be needing over the next 12 months. So if you're a permit holder, a renewal fee is a good choice. If you are wanting to do a nursery add-on, you could do the nursery add-on fee to cover the cost of your application for a nursery add-on. Permit holders who need to transfer, or if perhaps you need, say, a special inspection due to a sensitive species habitat review, perhaps, it's just an example, you could apply for a special inspection fee. And also Appendix G fees for permit holders. All of these are listed on the fee waiver list on the Cannabis Program website, and they all are eligible for the fee waiver program. Other agency fees eligible for fee waivers, permitting fees that are required for issuance and operation of a County of Mendocino commercial cannabis business permit may be eligible for a fee waiver. So good examples, you are a mixed light cultivator and or say like a nursery cultivator, and you have hoop houses or greenhouses that need permitting that are identified with your cultivation site, absolutely those permits, those ag exempt or commercial greenhouse permits are eligible for a fee waiver from the equity program. Grading permits for cannabis irrigation and or Department of Fish and Wildlife Lake and Streamlet Alteration Agreement projects, they would be eligible for fee waivers. Department of Environmental Health has some permits that might also be eligible for fee waivers, such as well permits for cannabis irrigation wells, commercial septic permits for your cultivation site or nursery operations employees to use. And then examples of what's not eligible. I'm sure we'll get plenty of questions and have further discussion about this later in the conversation or later in today's meeting. But Class K residential permits are still a no. And I know there's many instances where folks have to permit their housing structure in order to have a cultivation permit on said parcel or a micro business. We did have some conversation with both County Council and Planning and Building Services, and the Class K building permits are not eligible for the fee waiver program. Grading permits that are for ponds, as an example, that are not going to be used for cannabis irrigation would not be eligible for a fee waiver. So the permit that you're seeking eligibility for a fee waiver for must be directly related to your cannabis business operation. It cannot be a residential permit or to provide water, whether it's for fire or irrigation or supplemental use to a non-cannabis activity. Let's see. Yes, and then state and other annual state agency fees are not eligible for fee waivers, but definitely eligible for direct grant monies. Okay, I think we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers today. Before we go to Q&A, I want to just pause and see if any of the other panelists have any additional information they'd like to add before we go to Q&A. All right, hearing none, we have just a few questions in the chat. We will go through those first, and then we'll go to folks who would like to ask their questions orally. And so if you would like to ask a question during the Q&A section of this meeting, we encourage you to raise your hand. We see a couple attendees have raised their hands, so we'll bundle a couple of these questions together, and then we'll come right back to these attendees who have their hands raised. The raise hand feature is located either at the bottom of your screen or generally the top of your screen, wherever your toolbar pops up for your Zoom platform. If you are calling into today's meeting, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 at any time during the meeting, and we will be able to identify you on our panelist screen. For folks who did not put their name into the registration or their Zoom platform, so maybe they aren't recognizable, we'll do our best to try to identify you if you raise your hand. If you raise your hand as a caller, I'm going to call out the last 4 digits of the phone number as it appears on our screen. When we call on you to make a comment, if you are on a device such as a laptop, desktop, or other sort of electronic iPad device, the mute button for your audio should be on the lower left-hand side or in the window that you see that identifies yourself in the gallery or the list for participants. And then to unmute yourself and mute yourself when it is your turn to speak and you're calling in from a phone, that will be *6, and we will help to remind you as we are unmuting you. So, with that,
Kristen?
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking, I was thinking I could read the questions for you, And then you could answer the questions. That way you don't have to both read and answer. Does that work for you?
I think that's great. Let's try to bundle some if we can. And
Sure.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. First question, how will applicants be informed of their application status, i.e. incomplete, denied, granted, request for more info, or corrections? So why don't I take this one, because I think that speaks to the core of the underwriting process. So, and whoever's deleting the questions, if you could wait until the question's answered before you delete it.
Absolutely, sorry about that.
Okay.
If you click the answer tab, it's there.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah, perfect. No worries. So you will be informed about your application status, what information is incomplete through your underwriter. If you have questions about the status of your application, you should go first to your underwriter. If for some reason the underwriter is unavailable, you can definitely send your questions to me. But if there's any additional information that's required, i.e. incomplete, your underwriter will inform you of that. We have never denied a grant. So people have pulled out of the process and abandoned their application, but we've never said no. Usually the issues that delay the underwriting process is the time it takes for you to get the information that's requested, but we've never said no to anyone. You will be informed that you have been granted. Let's take the direct grant as an application once your budget has been approved. That was one of the steps that Kristen talked about through the underwriting process. But once your budget has been approved, you will receive an email from me that's, basically says that your budget has been approved, and it will, in that email, your draft grant agreement will be attached, and you will be able to set up a meeting with your underwriter to go through the grant agreement so that you can get all your questions answered. And then once you've been through that grant review process, simultaneously, the documents will be uploaded to Cobblestone so that the city can also participate in the signature process and the check writing process as Kristen has already articulated. If there's requests for more information or corrections, you will be informed of that through your underwriter. Okay, question 2. Up to 10% can be allocated to technical assistance, but doesn't have to be. So it's not phrased as a question, but I think the meaning is, can the 10% that's been allocated to technical assistance be reallocated if, I suppose, the funding isn't used? Kristen?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple pieces to this. So I believe that we can request that funding be reallocated should we find ourselves in a position where that 10% that has been allocated to technical assistance is not been spent down and we're approaching a deadline. And I think that the request that I'm referencing would be a request to the state. Now, in the previous slides, we showed that 10% currently is allocated to technical assistance, and that's based on a board decision from 2020. However, in, I want to say January, but it's all this year is blurring together a little bit for me. In January or February of 2022, the board did authorize the Mendocino Cannabis Program to make changes to the policy manual. So, and then to implement said changes, and we just have to report that back to the board. So I believe that if we're getting close to a deadline and technical assistance hasn't moved, the MCP can reach out to the state to see about adjusting our budget. And if approved by the state, we could execute that. So I think that that's the answer to the next 2 questions, it looks like.
Yes, perfect. Great. Next question. How many applications are reviewed at the average weekly review meeting? Between 5 and 10. That may increase as more applications come, get through the funnel. But right now we're reviewing between 5 and 10 a week. Next question. Why are the 7 different county departments? Why are there 7 different county departments that need to review the grant agreement? Kristen?
I can't say as to why for all of them, but I can tell you what they are. And so we review the grant agreement. So that includes the MCP. Our risk department reviews the grant agreement. County council reviews the grant agreement. Contracts and fiscal, 2 separate units, review the grant agreement. The auditor's office reviews the grant agreement and then has a secondary approval step after everyone has signed off to the grant agreement. And I think I got everyone. William, do you think I missed anyone on that list?
So there's another fiscal person called the purchasing agent. It is required by the state. They have to look at it. They don't have to approve it or deny it. They just have to see it.
Okay.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you. Next question. Are fee waivers taxable?
I don't know the answer to that, and I would encourage anyone with questions about what is and what's not taxable to please do talk to your tax preparer or your tax accountant. We are not tax experts, nor do we determine what may or may not be taxable.
Right. And when you speak with your tax preparer, the only nuance you might want to share with them is the fact that you didn't actually receive cash, right? You just received a fee. So you need to just make sure you clarify that with your tax accountant when you are asking the question. Great. All right, next question. Can the underwriters commit to sending this information, the PBS fee waiver estimate form or any other forms like this to the applicants, or can they be listed on the website as opposed to putting the responsibility on the applicant to ask for it if they didn't see this meeting? Absolutely. We can send it out and we can post it on the website. Great idea. Thank you. Next question. Are the direct grant fund money separate from the fee waiver money, or does the fee waiver amount come out of the direct grant amount? So it depends. If you are applying to pay for a state fee, the money will come out of the direct grant funding. If you are applying for a Mendocino County fee, then you can receive a fee waiver. Okay, yeah. So state fees come out of the direct grant. Mendocino County fees are fee waivers.
And just to add to that,
yeah,
eligible applicants they can apply for up to $50,000 in direct grant funding. You can receive the entire $50,000 in direct grant funding and have fee waivers issued in addition to your $50,000 direct grant. So the pools are somewhat different as far as what you're eligible for. There's a set amount of fee waivers each eligible applicant may be awarded, as well as the $50,000 direct grant fund that they may be awarded. So you don't have to deplete your direct grant award amounts with fee waiver amounts, but there is some difference in what is eligible for a fee waiver versus direct grant funding. So I'm going to kick it back to you, Paula.
Great. Next question. I submitted my LEAP application fee waiver prior to the PBS fee waiver estimate form being created. Do I need to resubmit my fee waiver? Yes, I think you will.
No, absolutely not. I'm sorry to interrupt. Appendix G fees are MCP fees, and they have to be a fee waiver for MCP. You cannot submit your Appendix G fees or your Appendix G forms to PBS.
Well, I think there's one question before that, Kristen.
My apologies.
That's okay. So I think the question before we get to the Appendix G, and I'll read that question momentarily, is I'm assuming that going forward, everyone who wants a fee waiver will need to submit the fee waiver form from PBS, correct?
Correct.
And if you've already worked with an underwriter, we will get you the form so that you can complete it and resubmit your fee waiver. Okay?
Unless you have a fee that is set in stone. So like egg exempt fees are based on the size of the egg exempt structure. So there may be some PBS fees that you've already received verification from PBS. So if the individual with a question about the fee waiver application, the big thing with the PBS fee waiver is for all of those fees that are scale-based, right? So a lot of PBS's fees have a kind of a sliding scale cost associated with the size and scope of the project you're applying for a permit for. So there might be some just classic fees that you might be able to put on your fee waiver, or you may have already submitted that are PBS fees that don't need an estimate. It just depends on the circumstances. I don't know where this individual is with their building permits. They might have a clear amount to just wrap up that building permit. So I wouldn't say it's 100% across the board, but in most cases, yes, you will want to use the fee estimate form.
Great. Okay, now the Appendix G fees. MCP is not currently processing Appendix Gs, and fees that will be coming in the next 12 months. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. And fees that will be coming in the next 12 months are part of the fee waiver. Will Appendix Gs be reviewed Will Appendix Gs be reviewed in the next 12 months so that they qualify for a fee waiver?
Well, this question is worded interesting. I'm going to take it in a couple different parts. So you will want to only apply for a fee waiver that you're going to spend in the next 12 months, right? And I want to be clear that Appendix G fees are going to be required before the processing begins. So right now we have a number of Appendix G submissions that are in the queue to be assigned to the planner. Once they're assigned to the planner, we will be asking for that fee before the processing progresses. So we just are not at the point of being able to assign until we get through some other projects within the department. So it's not, the fee waiver is not dependent on the timing for review. It's dependent on the timing for submission. If you took an Appendix G fee waiver and we haven't for some reason assigned your Appendix G, but we've received it, you can contact us and say, listen, I know you guys haven't assigned my Appendix G, but I would like to pay for my Appendix G fee with my fee waiver, and we would go ahead and process it, and then it would show and track it that even though you might not be under review, you have paid for the fee for that review to be conducted. I hope that helps.
Perfect. Next question. Can the program send notice to applicants about where they are in the process? We could, but I think a more efficient way to go is for you to just simply ask. You can ask your underwriter, or you can send an email to me and ask. Remember, we're dealing with 396 different application touch points, so that's a lot. And if we're not being responsive enough, I would be happy to send out notices to everyone. But I think a more efficient process would be for you guys to simply ask your underwriter, or you can ask me. Next question. If our county permit renewal is due before fee waiver funds have been released, will the applicant/permit holder be reimbursed for the fees paid? On the MCP webinar last week, we were told that no renewal applications would be reviewed without payment.
Yeah, that is true. So we are working through some applications, but the old process of submitting your renewal paperwork and then waiting until it has been issued or approved for payment to be due is changing, and we will not be processing all of these renewal applications going forward and then collecting payment at the end. So, two-part question. will we be able to reimburse folks who say submitted renewals but are waiting for a fee waiver for the renewal that's in our office? We cannot reimburse. And the fee waiver program, again, is not a payout program directly to an applicant. It's an internal account transfer, right? I think is probably the best way to explain it. I think if you are in our renewal pool and you are working on a fee waiver, it would behoove you to have your underwriter contact us at cannabisprogram@mendocinocounty.org to let us know that you have a fee waiver application in process. We can then have the conversation about the timing on that and see if there's a way for us to remedy the hiccup in the timing as we adjust our policies around renewal fees. But again, you would please ask your underwriter to contact us so that we can confirm where you are in the process and see if we can't get that renewal fee waiver moving forward somehow so that you don't end up having to pay out of pocket when you are eligible for payment through the fee waiver program.
Great. This question has already been asked. Can we be informed where the applicant is in the approval process, i.e. each department that the application is in? Yes, please contact your underwriter and we will definitely inform you about where you are in the process. Where can I locate the requirements on your website to determine the eligibility for the fee waiver? Kristen, doesn't Building and Planning Services determine eligibility?
No, they're talking about, I think this question is about the elevateimpact.com website. So eligibility for fee waivers, I think, is really what fees apply or what fee waivers may be, or what permit fees may be eligible for a fee waiver. So folks should visit the elevateimpactmendo.com website, and in the homepage at the top, in the toolbar, there is a fee waiver program tab. You can click that open and you'll see some options, whether it's criteria, which I think is what you'll want to look at if you don't know what might be eligible for a fee waiver. I would recommend going to the fee waiver criteria page, but that information should be readily available on the elevateimpactmendo.com website.
Great. Can we make changes to our budget after approval? I was under the impression that we could after November's LEAP meeting, but now I hear that might not be true.
So once the MCP has approved your grant and we have put the information into the grant agreement, you can make changes. However, it's hugely problematic. Once that approved grant agreement has been loaded into the Cobblestone contract platform for the county, changes to that grant agreement force us to press pause on the processing of that grant agreement, so it will stop the routing to various departments. Once we amend or adjust the grant agreement because there's different items someone might desire to change in the budget or the scope, we have to then re-upload it, and then it starts over at the beginning, like a brand new grant agreement being entered into Cobblestone. If you want to try to change a grant agreement after you have signed the agreement, we don't have a process for that right now. So we are having an internal conversation about whether or not there will be or should be or could be a pathway to change a grant agreement after check issuance. And we don't have a process or a definitive response. I would say it's not available currently, is what I would say. So after issuance, not available currently. During approval processing, available, but it stops the agreement in its tracks and sends it back to underwriting, back to the approval meeting, and then back through the Cobblestone process.
Yep.
I guess this is Bruce. Kristen, I guess I've had some questions about this in the underwriting process, is that a lot of invoices submitted were quote unquote estimates by contractors and vendors. And of course, 3, 4, 5 months from now, price of lumber may go up or solar panels up or down. If the expense doesn't exactly match the invoice that was submitted, say 3 or 4 months ago, what would you say to our applicants about that possible scenario?
That's a reconciliation component, right? So I like to explain it this way. If there's 5 projects included in your grant agreement and project 4 costs less than your budget and scope indicated, and project 5 costs more than your budget and scope indicated, you could utilize that unspent money from project 4 to cover those additional expenses associated with project 5. But when I'm thinking about changes to a budget after approval, I'm thinking about additions, like adding whole new project scope, right? And budget line items. That is what is hugely problematic, and that we currently do not have a pathway for that once the check has been issued.
Okay, thank you.
And so I want to be a little mindful of time. It's 4:24, and I think what we should do is go to the folks who have their hands raised. They've been patient. They probably have some questions that are also on our mail-in list. So the first person that I see on the panelist screen who would like to ask a question is Paul and Susan. Paul Hansberry and Susan Tibbin. I do not have access. Okay. So someone gave them permission to talk. So it looks like Paul, Susan, please, you feel free to unmute and you have the floor.
Yeah, hi.
Kristen? Yes. This is Chris. I'm the timer, and Paul, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Paula.
Hi, this is Paul Hansberry, Lovingly and Legally. I'm reading the resolution from the February 8th Board of Supervisors meeting that was passed unanimously. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors, 1, authorizes the Cannabis Program Director to update, amend, implement revisions to the Mendocino Local Equity Program Manual to streamline the program and maximize access to fee waivers, direct grants, and technical assistance to the extent permitted by the state law and regulations and guidance issued by the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. The program manual and any amendments thereto shall be published on the Cannabis Program's website and filed with the Clerk of the Board of Supervisors and shall be effective upon such a publication and filing. That tells me that they trust Kristen, they trust you enough to be able to use your discretion to change any kind of policy, whether there's a pathway there or not, to accept revisions or amendments, which I was told, which we were all told we would be able to do. And now we're being told that, no, we can't do it. We can jockey it back and forth if something comes in under budget. I was told absolutely with no uncertain terms to wait until you get the check before you make the amendments to the thing, because it would just slow down the process. I've been through this a number of times, and I want to see what you're telling me seems to contradict what was just passed unanimously on February 8th. Can you address that, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to address that. I currently do not have a legal pathway to work with folks to address contracts after checks have been issued. And we have some questions out to the state about how that might work. And this is specific to, again, Paul, adding new items that didn't previously appear. So if all of a sudden you don't have, say, like a solar system on your budget and scope, and you're like, okay, I decided, I have my check, I really want a solar system, right? And I want to spend my money on that. I don't have a way currently to go back and do that. We are having a number of conversations about expanding the program. I did talk to county council. They don't have a set way to provide us or guidance to provide us on how that might work. So we're researching it, but just because I don't have a legal pathway or implementation mechanism, I can't promise it today. It's something we're looking into, and if we can figure it out, we'll let you know. But currently, I don't have a protocol or a pathway to offer that.
I thought that the resolution gave you the pathway, the authority to create your own pathway.
Well, but the pathway is not created, right? So I need to work with the state and county council to have them provide me guidance and the department guidance and how we might implement something like that. Those conversations are ongoing, but currently I don't have the guidance to say this is how you would do it. So we can't offer it as a tool to folks who have been awarded if I don't have a way to articulate how to do it. I don't know what the steps are. I don't know what to ask of the applicant. I don't know how we would track it. I don't know how we report it to the state. So again, we're having conversation with the cannabis ad hoc and county council and the state. We might get there, but today it's not a viable pathway because I don't have any tools that help me understand how I would possibly implement something like that right now.
Okay, Susan has a few words to say as well.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. And Kristen and Elevate team, thank you for doing this and filling us in. I want to cast a little more light on the tax issue. And as you're looking at increasing the pathways to inclusion, we very, very much advocate for including all relevant taxes incurred by any and all grants and post this information on hard copy grant guidelines, website, incorporated into any and all Zoom, webinar, or in-person presentations. It may come as news to some people, but grant applicants are almost universally low income, on a fixed income, and or struggling to enter the newly legalized market. If grant applicants had tax attorneys that are now between $350 and $500 an hour, they probably wouldn't be applying for a grant. So this information is available. It may be time consuming and difficult to get the codes and modes to include, but really it makes a huge, huge difference as to whether people can even apply for a grant if they don't have an extra $14,000, $15,000, $16,000 in cash aside from the grant. So thank you for continuing to explore this, and let's see what we can do working with the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both Paul and Susan. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to mute. And then we will, our next caller is Monique Ramirez. Monique, you should be able to unmute yourself and you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I have a couple questions. The first one is about fee waivers. And I know that everyone's been allocated $7,000 to use, but not everyone may find a use for all of that funding, and it may just come down to their renewal applications. So I'm curious if that funding can be postmarked for the future years that they stay in this program. And also if applicants can add additional fee waiver requests after a direct grant agreement has been processed, or if that, is I'm curious about the timeline with fee waivers and the direct grant fee waiver or direct grant waiver, and if you can basically add new things to your fee waiver request at this time, especially kind of learning all this new information. And then the last question, which I can wait to ask if you'd like.
Yeah, let me tackle these if you don't mind, Mo. That'd be great.
No problem.
And then we'll come back to you in a minute. So the fee waivers, I think if you're an eligible applicant for the equity program, and you are eligible for $7,000 in fee waivers, you do not have to spend that full $7,000 down in 1 year, right? We are looking at this as a long-term program, and we're looking to work with our eligible applicants over a multitude of years. So if perhaps you only spend $2,000 in fee waivers in year one, and there's still monies the next year for allocation, you can spend another $2,000 the next year or another $5,000 the next year. What we're working on right now is putting in some tracking protocols. So equity applicants who don't spend down all of what they're allowed in year one, say, of a funding round, we can track them to show how much they're eligible for in each of the categories in future years. So yes, you can continue to apply for fee waivers as you'll be needing them in the next 6 months or so. and you just can't exceed $7,000. And we have to have fee waiver money in the pool. But it looks to me like we've been pretty gosh darn successful in getting money. So I'm hoping that our program will continue to be funded in perpetuity as long as there's need from the community. So next question, Mo.
Okay, thank you. That's really great. One item that I would like to bring to the attention just for allocation is being able to use the fee waiver for the weights and measures scale registration fee that's due with the ag department. And I'm wondering if that could be allocated for it, because I do know that even though the ag department is at the county building, it's still run by the state. So I'm not sure if that would fall under a state fee waiver category, which would then kick it into direct grant, or if this, in this specific case, it could be used for the county.
I don't know, but I wrote that down as a note. And I think what we can do as we're exploring trying to expand the program and make it more accessible is this question specifically. We can reach out to Department of Ag. So we'll have to table the response. But I think not just the weights and measures, but also any kind of like pesticide handler certificate that they offer. So we'll have to outreach and see what they say and figure out how to proceed from there.
Okay. And then my last question was just about, not being able to go back and amend a budget that's already been approved, especially if an item has or a contract has already been signed. One thought is if somebody is staying still within the project scope, but maybe they have to change the vendor that they're purchasing the materials from, or maybe the materials themselves have to change, but it's still in the same scope of the project, that perhaps there can be a streamlined pathway to make a small amendment without having to go through the full process again. So
I think you nailed it right there. Is it still within the scope of the project, right? So if you put amendments from spare time and I've got a spare time estimate, but spare time suddenly doesn't have the kelp product that you like or right, the compost that you desire, can you source that from elsewhere? Absolutely. Absolutely. So it just needs to be within the scope of the project. And if you have questions, you can email the Elevate Impact team and ask them, right? If you are ordering solar panels and you've, made an estimate or put an estimate together and submitted it from one provider and suddenly they can't service your needs, so you have to go with a different provider, it's still within that scope and that budget that we approved for you upgrading your solar system.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was thinking more in line of like packaging, like maybe it's not feasible to purchase glass and that's what you thought you would buy. And now you're going to do bags. Like it's still packaging. It's still,
yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
That's really, really helpful. Super appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you for muting, and we will go to our next caller, who is Michael Katz. Michael, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the conversation. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all the answers and all the time for question and answer. I just got a few questions here. The first one related to my comment about technical assistance earlier, is that my understanding is within the state program that 10% of the allocated funds can be allocated towards technical assistance, but there is no requirement from the state that those funds be used for that. So yes.
Right. So I agree with you, but currently
yes,
we're using that system because it's what the board set up.
Yes, totally understand. Yeah, currently that's the case. And, that's another conversation, but just wanted to be clear for everyone that it's not written into the state law that we have to do that. But yes, totally agree on that. Regarding the question about the after the fact contract changes, certainly we're aware of addendums and things that can be done. And I think that really the intent of the board meeting, and as Paul indicated, is for us and for the program and for the community, for all of us to work on what those pathways are. And so, it should be, we're hoping to see that be implemented in a way where, we're talking to the state saying, this is what we are looking to do. And then unless there's a specific prohibition against it, we would definitely like to see that implemented because that will provide the most flexibility. And unless there's a specific prohibition, we should have the ability to work towards that and use the funds most.
So I'm going to respond to that quickly because just because the state will allow it does not mean that it is implementable by the department. So we have to ensure that we have legal pathways to implement something, and that we have support from counsel in implementing it. And also there's a consideration for the department with all of our programs about regarding the cost of implementation. So currently, if we had 30 grants out in the field and they were all changing on a regular basis, we would need a whole full-time staff person just to address some of that tracking. So I'm not opposed to exploring it, but I will not and cannot make guarantees that everything that's allowed by the state is going to be readily implemented by the cannabis department. And other considerations.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I think the key component that everyone is the most concerned about is the tax component. And so, if something has to be narrowed down on, then, maybe that would be the thing to do. But since we have the unanimous support of the board in creating this opportunity, I think it's on all of us to do everything we can to make it actually as flexible and useful as possible. So thank you for continuing to look into that and having this conversation.
All right. Any questions, Michael?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, great. If you would be so kind as to mute your device, that would be fabulous. And we'll go to our next caller, who is Petra Buchanan. Petra, you should be able to, let's see, it doesn't look like we've got you in the queue yet. Why don't you promote her as a panelist for a moment, and then we can always remove her from panelist. Hopefully it doesn't eliminate her from the...
Okay, can you guys hear me now? Because I think I'm here.
Yep, you're here. Thanks for joining us.
I feel like we've gone over this a bit, but I feel like I just want to word it in a different way, maybe. So I've already applied for the direct grant and it's in process, and hopefully I'll be approved soon for the next round. But I would like to apply for the fee waiver, but applying for it sounds stupid at this point because I don't want to delay my direct grant at all. And what I'm wondering is, once I'm approved for the direct grant, could I say reapply for the fee waiver in another application? Would that maybe be a better way to go about that?
Think of them as two different programs, right? Like, you're not going to get a fee waiver if you don't apply for a fee waiver. You're not going to get a direct grant if you don't apply for a direct grant. They can run parallel to each other. They can run at totally different times from each other. Right? You can have your direct grant under processing, and while you're going back and forth with your underwriter, you can be like, oh, geez, I have a fee coming up in 6 or 9 months. I'm going to apply for a fee waiver, right? It doesn't have to be an all at once scenario where you apply for everything you want at once or you're not going to get it. This is a kind of a rolling process.
Kristen, the only caveat there is if it's state fees. If it's a state fee, then it does belong in the direct grant process. If it's a county fee, it is completely separate pools of money and processes.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about county fees because the state has a separate grant.
Right. And then Kristen's answer is correct. It's two separate processes. It won't hurt your direct grant application.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our next caller is Kevin Bush. Kevin, you should be able to unmute yourself in just a moment here. There you go. You should be able to unmute yourself now, Mr. Bush, and ask your question. Oh, okay. We lost Kevin Bush, so maybe he'll be back. And so, Paula, in the meantime, should we go back to the list of questions in the Q&A feature, and you want to read them and we'll continue through them?
Sure, absolutely. So can you hear me okay?
Yep, we hear you loud and clear.
Perfect. So the next question is, what is the likelihood that all of the available funds will be distributed by the deadline?
Well, now that the deadline is August of 2022, I think it's a very high likelihood that they'll be distributed before the deadline. So I think we're in good shape with that new extension.
Right. And we just found out about that extension this week. So I think we're in good shape. Next question. Have there been any changes to the grant agreement since the initial version that requires the grantee to give the county access to all financial records? I don't think so.
I'm not familiar with a requirement that the county be given access to all financial records. I'm not even sure what all financial records means. But we have it, we've got the same version of the grant agreement that we originally published. It's a template for the county. So it's what was used for the PG&E grant funds with different exhibits. It's what the county wants to use for all grant programs going forward. So I'm not familiar with the provision that this question is about.
And, I don't think it's a requirement. I will say that in other this is consistent with other jurisdictions that the county has the right to, but it's not a, they have the right to, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily going to do this all the time. They just have the right to access certain financial records. And this is a requirement that's in every grant agreement that I've seen in all the other jurisdictions that I've worked in. It's just the right to, but it's not necessarily a have, that the jurisdiction will always require it to be executed. All right, next question. Can the technical assistance grant be used for some other continuing education rather than the courses listed on the Elevate website, such as OSHA training or tax courses?
Currently, I would say no. And that's simply because the scope of the technical assistance program is determined by the policy manual, which has not been changed. And so I think that in the future, is this something that we could consider? I think we can definitely have a conversation about what other training opportunities might fit into the technical assistance pool. But for now, the only technical assistance grants that are available are for those education opportunities listed on the elevateimpactmendo.com website.
Great. Next question. Can an eligible farm apply twice for a LEAP grant? Do you have to wait to apply for the second grant? So, go ahead.
I mean, I think that this can be, it kind of use the metaphor as there's like a million different ways to skin a cat, right? So first of all, if the farm is owned by more than one individual, right, and both individuals are equity eligible, each individual can apply for a direct grant in the individual person's name. So if Paula and I owned a farm together and we had lots of projects that needed to be done on our farm, and I was eligible, equity eligible, and Paula was equity eligible, I could apply for $50,000 worth of direct grant funding for projects that I identify in my scope in my budget. And Paula could apply for up to $50,000 in direct grant funding. And the projects in the scope would have to be different, right, so to speak, and or work together to show that the monies aren't going to be duplicatively allocated, right, so to speak. But if Paula and I own a farm and we decide to apply to be eligible for equity in the name of our corporate entity, right, Paula and Kristen's Amazing Farm, right, then the entity is what is either going to be determined eligible or not. And as an individual or an entity, you can only apply for up to $50,000 of grant funding. So if we applied to the equity program as Paula and Kristen's Amazing Farm, and Paula and Kristen's Amazing Farm qualified for equity program, we would only be eligible to apply for one grant agreement under Paula and Kristen's Amazing Farm. I hope that that helps. So in relationship to the second grant, if Paula and I are the individuals applying for direct grants because we're both as individuals eligible, we would submit our own independent grant applications for 2 grant applications, one for me, one for Paula. If Paula and I, or Paula or I, or the entity applies for a grant now that's for less than $50,000, say we apply for a $25,000 grant, can we come back and apply for a second grant for another $25,000? Absolutely, as long as there's funding still available. You can still spend up to or be awarded up to $50,000. So probably a little more information than needed there, but there's lots of different scenarios that kind of fit into those 2 questions.
Next.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I think,
please, Paula.
Yes, I think you've already answered this question, but do scale certification fees qualify for a fee waiver?
Scale certification fees are in the Department of Agriculture, and we don't currently have a fee waiver program with them, but we will explore that. So not today are they eligible, but I would think so in the future. That is a likely answer. We will get back to you.
Okay, great. Next question. Is the 2020-1040 on an individual required for applying for the grant as a corp? If you are applying as a corporation, do you only upload the appropriate form for taxes on the corporation? So I think this speaks to if you're applying as an individual or you're applying as a corporation. If you are applying as a corporation, then you should definitely upload the tax forms for your corporation. If you're applying as an individual, you should upload the tax forms as an individual. Bruce, do you have any other thoughts about that question? Are you muted?
Yeah, I am.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Bruce.
Yeah, I mean, so on the taxes, there's 2 charges here. One is we want to make sure people are compliant with their taxes, and that can be satisfied by the individual filing their taxes. As far as the corporate, if you're applying as a corporation, then you should file your corporate taxes. But I just want to get people to focus on the fact we're looking for tax compliance versus the amount you're making or whatever. I had some questions in underwriting about, will it jeopardize my ability to be eligible? And to be clear, it does not. This is not an income threshold. This is a tax compliant threshold we're looking for here.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. Next question. We are hearing that you're not being responsive enough. Asking an underwriter or you, I think that means Paula, is not sufficient. Not everyone is on this webinar. That's why folks are asking for more outreach from you. We are trying to be as responsive as we can. As I mentioned earlier, we're literally processing 400 different applications at this point for fee waivers and direct grants and technical assistance. So I would encourage you to, if you're not hearing from your underwriter to please, notify me. We have brought on board Stacy, who is our customer relations person, who is literally trying to respond to everybody's emails and make sure that if for some reason the underwriter has missed an email, that the underwriter follows up. You can definitely reach out to Stacy if you're having trouble getting in touch with your underwriter or you're getting in touch with me. We are trying to put a lot of infrastructure in place to be as responsive as we can. But there has been sort of a flood of applications applications due to the urgency deadlines, and I apologize if you don't feel like we're being responsive enough, but please let me know if this problem continues. We've gotten through a lot of backlog. We had 2 urgency deadlines, one in December and then another one in February, which whenever we have the urgency deadlines, as you can imagine, there's a flood of people who are requesting information about the program. Now that we've gotten through both those urgency deadlines, and now that the August 2022 deadline is in place. It used to be February and now it's August. That gives us a little more breathing room, and we should be able to get to everybody a lot more quickly now that that backlog has started to free up a bit. My apologies, but we're trying as hard as we can, and Stacy has been brought on board also to help us be more responsive to people. Next question. When is the new policy for payment in advance of work starting?
So that is not an equity related question, just so folks on the call aren't like, what the heck is this? So we did announce, the MCP did announce that we will not be processing new applications such as those for renewals or modifications or Appendix Gs. We will not be processing materials until payment is made. We have started that policy currently. There are a number of renewals that have come in that planners are working on, that we're contacting. We have admin staff contacting and responding to those applicants to simultaneously make the payment. So we didn't put like a hard stop, everything's on the back burner, but we are requesting payment. And so as we get more automated, it's going to be a more rigorous hard stop on that timeline. As soon as we get the new round of portals in place for renewals, and I'm looking forward to phase 3 applications, that application won't even be sent to cannabis program until it is paid for. So we won't even see it until it's paid for. So that's the future. But today we're trying to work with everyone through the transition of paying for work before the work is started.
Great. So, Kristen, I do see a number of questions from people who've asked several questions earlier. So I'm going to scroll down to see if I see any new names that haven't yet asked a question since we're down to our last 5 minutes. Do you mind if I do that?
I don't mind if you do that. And do you mind if I respond to a question that I was hoping to type an answer, but I pushed the wrong button?
Okay, sure.
So there is a question that has come in about the grant agreements and some requests to County Council to make changes to the grant agreement. I apologize that no one has gotten back to this individual who asked this question. We are not planning to make any of those recommended or requested changes to the grant agreement template. So I just wanted to make sure that I responded to that because it was outstanding. My apologies.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That was going to be the question I was going to read. Okay, great. Okay. Let me make sure if anybody else. Let's see. Here's a new person. Is there any chance that the county is going to remove the requirement that an unpaid cultivation taxes be paid before the grant money is released?
No, and I think that that's outside of the scope of the policy manual. So I don't think that I have the ability or the department has the ability to change that. There's a number of board directives that have been handed down or put forward from the Board of Supervisors to county staff, both department staff and treasurer tax collector staff, to rigorously pursue payment of unpaid cannabis business taxes and cannabis business taxes going forward. So there's a little crossover in those directives. So I don't think we have the authority to change the board directive around deprioritizing individuals with unpaid commercial cannabis business taxes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question. I'm going to read this. If I am a phase 1, 2, and 3 exempt and I am registered with Cdfw, how can I get help with the medical service for that?
I'm not aware of anyone who has a commercial cannabis opportunity who is exempt from permitting in the county. So if you are cultivating for personal use, you don't qualify for the equity program, because the equity program in of itself is designed to assist businesses, right, operating in the legal cannabis framework. So there's not programs available via the equity program for individual cultivators cultivating for personal use or making medicine for personal use, or a caretaker that may be caring for an individual under the personal use guidelines of the county.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to read this question because I think it clarifies.
Paula, I don't know if we have time. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. No, you're right.
4:59. And so I think what we really are going to need to do is go ahead and stop the meeting. And I apologize that my PowerPoint went down. I think my screen went to sleep.
Right.
Sorry about that. I apologize for questions that we didn't get to, but I do want to make sure that folks are aware that we do this every month, third Wednesday of the month. And if for some reason you heard about this meeting through word of mouth from a friend, we want to encourage folks to please do sign up for e-notifications, the county's e-notification system. You'll want to select Canon Notes. That is the best way for us to communicate with you. So if you want to know or stay up to date on meetings and what's going on with the MCP, please do sign up for Canon Notes. So last call for comments from our panelists before we adjourn.
I would only say that I'm so excited that the deadline has been extended to August. It gives us time to actually get these grants processed without losing so much sleep. I really want to thank the Elevate team because they have been working so hard over these last 60 days, which is really where the bulk of the work has come down to. And I just really want to applaud them for how much work they have done and how many applications we've been through. And I just want to give a shout out to Kristen and William, because I know that the equity grant program is not the only thing you're working on, but your ability to have been able to get things done as quickly as you have inside of these tight deadlines has been amazing. And so, I apologize that we haven't been able to move faster, but it doesn't mean we haven't been working really hard to get this money to you, and we will continue to do so.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar. Please do share that these are available with your neighbors, your friends, your family, and encourage them to join us and learn more about how they might engage in the equity program that the county offers. And we'll talk to you next time. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.